Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Alpha Protocol for PC and Xbox 360. Now this is Obsidian's first original game. Everything else they've done has been part of another series, like they did Knights of the Old Republic 2, they did Fallout New Vegas, Neverwinter Nights 2, and then they did Alpha Protocol, well obviously before New Vegas. But anyway, I go in there thinking, okay, it really can't be as bad as people say it is, because this game got a lot of negative press with it. Reviewers seem to hate it or think it was really mediocre, and so I go in there with a grain of salt. I'm like, okay, it's probably some reason that these people hate this, but I doubt it's as bad as they say it is. And so I really ended up discovering why people hate this on my own, and I'm actually glad I did discover why they hate it on my own, because just taking someone's word at it is a little bit difficult to really comprehend. Now, a lot of people complained about the graphics being subpar, and I go in there and I'm like, they're really not that bad. The textures and everything are fine, it's just that they're really not used to their full potential. This is Unreal Engine 3, it's capable of so much more. And Epic proved that with Gears of War and Unreal Tournament 3. And many other games have come out that have done much better graphics than Alpha Protocol on the Unreal Engine 3. And so it's really just not being used to its full potential. That said, the graphics themselves are not bad. The textures work fine, animations are fine, the modeling is fine, environments look fine. Everything looks fine, it's just everything is not used to full potential. I will say that the shaders seem a little off sometimes. And there's a few weird graphic glitches here and there, specifically with motion blur. But other than that, there's really nothing that's really bad about the graphics. They're just slightly lower generation than what they really should be. Now, the sound design is kind of all over the place. In general, it's okay, but first off, you have the sound effects, which are not good or bad. They just work. And really, that's what you expect in a game like this. Obsidian doesn't really put much stock into great sound effects at all. But they work, and they're not bad, so it really doesn't bother you at all. The voice acting is, in general, okay. There's a few voices here and there that are kind of really awful. Not many, but a few. And then there's a few voices here and there that just sound like they're reading a script, but they're not terrible. And it's just stuff like that kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. Yeah, the actors don't really put a lot of effort into it, and it's really not as bad as other games I've seen. For instance, Two Worlds has some really awful voice acting, but it's to the point where it's funny. Now, Alpha Protocol's voice acting is neither bad to the point of funny, nor is it good to the point of being good. It's just there, and it gets the job done. And then you have the music, which is really all over the place. You start the game thinking it's going to be horrendous because the menu music is the most jumbled, horrible mess of tones and scratches that I've ever heard as a song. And it is really, really bad. Then you get into the rest of the game, and it's not that bad. It's kind of this mix of techno and orchestral kind of stuff, and it works pretty well, actually. Now, none of it's particularly memorable, but that menu song, it's like etched into the back of my mind now as this constant reminder of horrible music. That's how bad the menu song is, but the rest of it's fine. And that's in general how the sound design itself is. It's fine, but it's not particularly great. Now, most people complained about the story and the gameplay the most. Now, the story itself is really not that bad. You play as Agent Michael Thornton of Alpha Protocol, which is a U.S. government organization similar to the CIA, but without all the red tape, basically, so they can do whatever they want to, or whatever they need to, I should say. Like they can assassinate people, that sort of thing, without any sort of red tape to go through or anything like that. So that's basically what you're doing the entire game. You're sneaking around, or you're going in guns blazing, whatever you want to play it. You're doing that kind of stuff, and you get involved in this conspiracy with arms trafficking and all sorts of different, really random seeming stuff. And it really comes together, but still, the story itself is just so stereotypically simple, I guess you could say. Now, it's well written. It's definitely not badly written. It's just that it's such a generic storyline that you end up not caring. The characters themselves, you end up not really caring about them either. For instance, one character that I thought would have been really interesting if they had explored this character, they just don't. she shows up once, and, well, twice, actually, and that's about it. It's like, okay, what was the point of that? And so, anyway, and you have a reputation system with them, to where if you do things the way they like it, like some people prefer it if you're more professional, some people like it if you're aggressive, and some people just like it if you're casual, you know, average Joe kind of guy and just goofing off and all that kind of stuff. That ties in with the dialogue system, but I'll get to that in a moment. But some people like those different things, and so if you behave a certain way with these people, you'll gain reputation with them or lose reputation. And that's basically their system, where it's this person likes you or doesn't like you. That's pretty much it. So that's how that works out. Now, that leads me to the dialogue system, which took a while getting used to. Now, you have basically 3 or 4 options depending on what you're doing. You have the professional option, the casual option, or the aggressive option. And that just depends. That's just the way you talk. Professionalism it's like, okay, this is for the mission, this is my duty, that kind of thing. Casual, you're just kind of joking around. Well, suave is the better way of saying it. Suave is kind of like your James Bond. You kind of goof off a little bit, but you still get stuff done. And then aggressive is just the kind of, I want to destroy things kind of path, and that's how you go with that. So it really just depends on the way you want to play it. Now, different people will interact different ways. Now, the problem with this dialogue system is that it's timed. So you have to basically make a split-second decision as to what you want to say, and then switch to that option within a moment. So it really takes getting used to. And when I first encountered it, I thought it was terrible. But after a while, I got used to it. I'm like, it works okay. So that's how that ends up being. Excuse me. Then you have the rest of the gameplay. Now, it's a role-playing game, but it's sort of like a Mass Effect kind of thing, where it's a role-playing game, but at the same time, it's a shooter. Now, that's a problem, because the shooter mechanic in Alpha Protocol is terrible. But I'll get to that in a moment. You're supposed to be able to play the way you want to play. And that means, for me, I wanted to play the stealthy character. The one who's a professional kind of guy who goes in, gets things done with as little loss of life as possible, if possible. Or if I'm going to be taking a bunch of lives, I want to do it quietly and without getting noticed. So that's what I ended up trying to do. Now, I was able to do that later on in the game when I had all my skills up really high, because you have a skill system where you're given a bunch of AP to spend on different skills, and depending on the way you want to play, you can put it in stuff like stealth, or pistols, or assault rifles, or technical aptitude, or martial arts, whatever you want to put it into. And so you can pretty much play the way you want to play it. Well, pretty much. But I could do that later on in the game. Now, early on, the game pretty much forced me to fight half the time. And that's mostly because my skills weren't high enough to really get anything done, really. So you end up having to run and gun half the game, and then the rest of the game you can play it the way you want to play. So, and the sad thing is, because the combat system is so rudimentary and really clumsy, because of the way you have to aim, it makes the game really more of a run-and-gun style than anything else, and that's a pretty big problem for me, because I wanted to play it stealthy and methodical, and all of a sudden I have to play it really fast-paced and just blasting things to pieces. And the AI really doesn't help that, because when you're going through this thing, sometimes the AI is completely retarded. Like, they won't notice you if you're literally in front of them. And other times, they'll be able to spot you from a mile away, through, like, a wall or two. And so that ends up being a pretty big problem, well, at least early on. Later on, you've got ways to counter that, but early on, you got problems. Now, once you got through all that kind of stuff, you get used to it, and it's really not that bad. The controls are kind of stiff. Sometimes they're a little unresponsive, but overall they work fine. It's really just something that takes getting used to. It's not that bad. But I can see how on console this would be a pain. Because on PC, I actually had to tweak the mouse sensitivity because it was way too slow, and there's no option in the menu. You actually have to go into the INI file, the config file for the game, and fix the mouse sensitivity. That's a problem. In fact, you have to tweak the game to get it to work. It's pretty buggy in some ways. Now, once you've tweaked it a little, it works fine, but I've never had major performance problems or anything. I mean, nothing unassociated with Unreal Engine 3. But anyway, once I got all that figured out, then I was introduced to the bane of my existence with this game, the minigames. These are some of the most irritating minigames I have ever played. In fact, they probably are the most irritating minigames I've ever played. Now, the lockpicking isn't that bad. You just line up these different tumblers with the laser line thing going across, and you get it at the right time. And you have a time limit for that. It's really not that bad. It just takes some patience and some precision. But other than that, it's really not that bad. But the bypass and the hacking minigames are what infuriated me the most. Let's start with the bypass. Now, this is basically the first one you encounter. You're given a circuit board, basically. And it's not like the Mass Effect 2 bypass where you just have to match things. No. You have to go in sequence with these different things. You have to find the number 1 and cut that pin. Then you have the 2 and cut that. And it's in this kind of jumbled maze-like thing. And it's really hard to find these things because of the color scheme and because nothing looks particularly outstanding, I guess you could say. So you sit there and struggle with this thing early on. And it's only like 4 pins early on. 4, 6 pins. Then you get later on in the game, and you have to do it for 10, 11, 12. And when you have a time limit on this thing, and when it triggers the alarm if you fail it, you have a problem. It gets ridiculously infuriating later on. So that's how that works out. Then you have the hacking minigame, which is equally as infuriating, but early on. Now, I didn't know that when you go into this hacking minigame, that changing the use key did nothing. So the original use key is spacebar. So I was sitting there trying to tap my new use key, which was F, which is just what I'm used to, and I end up finding that it doesn't work. So I'm sitting there flailing around madly trying to figure out what button works, and I find out it's the spacebar. So fair warning to you guys: instead of using whatever use key you've bound, it uses the spacebar. Now, anyway, the minigame itself, you are given 2 little segments, sequences, and you have to match them to something in a large grid within a time limit, within actually 2 time limits, because the one is the overarching time limit, and then you have the other one, which is this bar that fills up over time, and when it fills up, the thing jumbles up again, and you're given this grid where all these numbers are flashing all over the place, and these letters and everything. And there's these 2 segments in there that are standing still, and you have to match your segments to those. And so, when you're doing this, it ends up being ridiculously infuriating, because one of them, the right one, is controlled by the mouse. The other one is controlled by the keyboard. Now, the keyboard is much more precise. The mouse tends to go all over the place. And so, you're sitting there trying to get this thing to work, and it just doesn't. And so, it really gets on your nerves. And so that's really what infuriated me the most about this game. It wasn't the gameplay itself. The gameplay is fine, actually. When it worked, it's fun. But the problem was that the frickin' mini-games are so ingrained into the game. They're everywhere. It's like, oh, you want to hack this computer? Well, here's the hacking minigame. Well, it's a requirement. Exactly. Go! And later on, you're given smaller segments of these lines, and the thing goes faster. So you really just end up being ridiculously infuriated by it, and you just say, screw it, I'm not going to do this. So, really that's the problem with the game, is the minigames. It's not the gameplay itself, it's not the sound design, it's not the graphics. It is the minigames. They kill it. They kill this game. And if they didn't have these minigames in them, or if they made them much more accessible, much easier, because they're everywhere, and you can get interrupted while doing them, and so it really just gets on your nerves. And if the game let you actually play the way you want to play early on, because you end up having to fight bosses. Now, when you fight bosses, you really can't use stealth all that much, and that gets to be a massive pain. So you end up having to run and gun about half the game, and so it's this really weird thing where it's badly designed, but at the same time, it's not a terrible game. It's not as bad as people seem to think it is, but the minigames kill it, and it's really just doesn't let you play the way you want to play. But other than that, it's not a bad game. It's a 3 out of 5, and thanks for watching.